Welcome to It's Just Middle School with Sarah and
Kelly. If you're joining us for the first time today, we are two fabulous veteran middle school teachers with middle schoolers of our own that love talking about middle school.
Our passion is to support parents and educators in understanding the middle school years through research, experience, and casual conversation.
If you're returning to our show, welcome back. Let's jump into this episode's buzzword.
Gen Z
to Gen Alpha.
1. What are the characteristics of these generations?
2. And how have these generations influenced middle school culture?
And 3. What does this mean for the future of middle school education? Suck it up, Buttercup. Scenario 1. From the parent perspective. Your teacher said what? They told you to go jump off a bridge? How could an adult think that it is an appropriate thing to say to you? I never. I am calling the principal and telling that school they need to fire that teacher and pay for the emotional damage it caused my child.
Or, as a teacher, you look over to see Johnny goofing around with Bobby during your lesson. You tell him to stop and get back on task. The immediate response is, "He told me to," because your brain is multitasking on several things while monitoring the inappropriate event. You say, "Go jump off a bridge." Half the class looks at you with wide, oh my gosh, eyes. The other half bursts out laughing, including the student that was goofing around. The latter obviously understands your intended statement of, "If he told you to jump off a bridge, would you?" You laugh along for a second before explaining what you meant to say. Everyone seems to understand the reference and intent. However, at the end of class, you feel the need to restate. Okay, everybody. We know that I was not actually telling Johnny to go jump off a bridge, right? I mean, it was just an expression. And why? Why do we feel the need to clarify this? Because someone just might take this out of context, and it's going to become a whole thing that was never intended to be more than a few misspoken words that were explained and discussed in class. Scenario 2, the parent perspective. You are getting ready for the school year, and it's time to buy new clothes for your middle school child. The school uniform for girls' attire is to wear a khaki skirt. But comparatively to the trends in the department store, the school skirts seem a little long. I mean, it's not the 1950s for Pete's sake. You have the skirt hemmed just a little, so your daughter is not ostracized from her friend group. When you got it, flaunt it, right? She's not going to have those young legs forever. You want her to love her body, feel comfortable in her body. This is your way to acknowledge body positivity.
Or, from the teacher perspective, Sonia, a 7th grade student, walks into school. She is chatting with her best friends as she comes through the doorway. You welcome her in. "Good morning, Sonia. Looking forward to a great day today." As she walks past, you notice that the school sweatshirt she's wearing is relatively long, showing a sliver of a skirt hem. And as she walks past, you also notice a couple students in the corner giggling. You realize that from the back of the student, the combination of a backpack and a sweatshirt is pulling up her shorter than regulation length skirt, revealing a bit more than perhaps Sonia intended. You immediately pull her aside and quietly tell her to pull her skirt down. You ask if she owns any lengthier skirts and remind her of the dress code policy. She rolls her eyes and says, "I just have long legs." Okay, at this point, what can be done? Do you let it go? Do you get a counselor involved? Do you get administration involved?
So let's talk about Gen Z and Gen Alpha for a second. Our Gen Z students are those born between 1997 and 2012. These would be our current 7th grade students. Whereas our Gen Alphas are going to be our students born between 2013 and 2028. And these are our current 6th grade students. So we are seeing this transition appear in middle school currently. And with these groups of children, we're seeing that their feelings get hurt, and many of them internalize things that are meant to be very general. For example, when something is said to the whole class, many of them feel like you are talking directly to them when it was a very, very broad statement. They also tend to tune out things if they don't really think it pertains to them. So they're only grasping pieces of a whole story. I mean, I bet little Johnny completely left out the part that he was goofing around in class. He just mentioned the other piece of the story. So yes, you want to be your child's advocate, but what we also want our adults to know is that they might need to remember that there's more to the story than just what they hear.
Yes, and we are all, as parents and teachers, protecting our children, protecting our students. We all want the best for our children, and we want them to be at their best, no question. But the biggest difference among generational parenting and schooling is the widened gap of just what constitutes that best and who gets to place limits to ensure the best is shown, the school or the parent. It could be as simple as skirt length or as complex as a smartwatch. There is a great difference between how generations view schooling and education, and we see a lot of this difference in middle school where the most change happens, and it happens fast.
And now for a wee bit of research.
So let's talk about these changes that we are seeing as teachers as we look at two different generations at once. Our last year Gen Z students in our 7th grade and our first year Gen Alpha students in our 6th grade. So as this is a transitional year in generations, what we are seeing is that stress is something that both generations handle in similar ways. Stress is part of the conversation. We see it in Anxious Generations by Jonathan Haidt talks about stress levels and what the smartphone is doing. We mentioned him in our executive functioning episode. And then stress also is part of that social emotional learning we talked about with Abigail Schreier from a different perspective in episode 5. So we know that stress is a common occurrence in middle school.
And how they handle it.
And how, yes.
And how as parents, we kind of try to eliminate it more than helping them process through it. We see that definitely in both age groups.
Right. And as parents, we want our students and our children to not have as much stress as we had, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, as a parent, I don't want to see my 6th grader or 7th grader crying when they come home. I want them to be joyful and experience life with joy. But middle school tends to be that experience of stress for both generations. Another thing that's unique, though, in the Gen Z to Gen Alpha switch is we have technology, our attitude toward technology changes and shifts. When it comes to Gen Z, for example, where this is information is coming from a nutritional website, but it has called Primero Edge, and they say that the attitude with Gen Z, particularly with technology, is one of confidence. But then Gen Alpha goes even further to the extreme of adventurous, so that they are willing to try new things, which is great, but then without caution or understanding of whom to trust within that virtual world or digital world.
They're very much able to manipulate the technology to what they want it to do, whether it's positive or negative. Mm-hmm. And they don't unnecessarily have understand the consequences that can go with that.
Right, and not many middle schoolers can understand consequences to begin with. So that is a very abstract, but there's more temptation, I think, with Gen Alpha to be more adventurous with social media platforms, with technology platforms. Mm-hmm. Particularly, we see a shift when it comes to AI instruction. That's going to be new and adventurous as AI. We've talked about this with another previous episode already, but this idea of personalized education with Gen Alpha, not Gen Z. Gen Alpha has more personalized instruction, and then Gen Z has the more interactive experiences in their education prior. So that AI shift is going to be interesting to see in education and where it goes. I already have my thoughts on it, but I'm reserving it for later. And then with communication, it shifts as well. The Gen Z generation used Twitter and YouTube, but then as we shift to Gen Alpha, it's more quick TikTok and Instagram, and what that, and VR, and what that does with attention is really interesting.
Which is hard sometimes for us Gen Y and Gen X parents to fully understand unless you make yourself, because I've been told, Facebook is so old. It's for old people.
You know what?
And I'm like, I'm still going to go on my Facebook and check things.
You know what I learned the other day from a Gen Zer was, and this is through TikTok, so that kind of goes against it, but she was saying, do you know what girl money is?
Yes, I've seen those.
Yeah. I was like, no, I have no idea. And show me. And she goes, well, it's if you have cash and you pay with cash, then whatever you're buying is free.
Right, because your cash is not traceable.
It's not traceable, so it's free. It's like, that makes absolutely zero sense.
But somewhere that lesson is being taught. Yeah, because our kids don't understand that, these are just people and they're, a little bit of bias, and it's trying to be funny. That someone's going to take that as real math. That is going to get brought up in math class one of these days. I guarantee it.
And so when our Gen Alpha students and our Gen Z students in our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade look at these TikToks, that remember, their brain is going from the literal to the abstract. They're going to take things literally, so they might genuinely believe, an 11 or 12-year-old would genuinely believe that $100 cash, if they're paying for something, might be quote unquote free. But it's not that way.
Because they all also think they're all going to be NFL or NLB or some type of major league player or a famous YouTuber.
Yes.
They're all going to be that one day, because that's just where their brains are at.
So in terms of careers, those career goals have shifted between our generation as adults and as parents, from Gen Y to Gen X, where there was very, very clear careers in the future that we could choose our paths, to Generation Z and Gen Alpha, where they are crafting their own jobs. They are starting things that have never been done, never been seen before, because of technology's increase in our culture and multiple purpose use in our culture, as well as environmental shifts, etc. But what I thought was really interesting, there was an article on Forbes, and it talked about how Gen Z is not ready for the workforce. That there is a stunning survey by intelligent.com found that employers are not hiring Gen Z. 75% of the companies surveyed found their new Gen Z hires unsatisfactory. Whether it was the lack of motivation, the lack of professionalism, which I thought was interesting, poor organization skills, and poor communication skills that are part of that list. And I see it in...
I do too.
When, we go out to dinner and there's a Gen Z waitress.
Do we have to do this?
Right. I see it in my son, is also kind of I feel this like lack of urgency, lack of drive. And I worry about that. And I see it in students that have gone on and just not knowing that sense of private and public self and that sense of professionalism.
Well, and talking a little TikTok-y thing here, I was scrolling, and one of the scrolls I followed was this lady who is trying to help these Gen Z students, or really it's actually to help employers who hire these Gen Z students. And one of her, a little consultant. And, she's on her, it's just a scenario. So she's got her little mic on, and she was like, yes. Oh, so your employee called today and said they're not coming in because they couldn't find parking. Okay. Well, you need to encourage them that they need to keep driving around the block until they find parking and they need to come into work. That parking is not a realistic expectation of what you take off work for. She's like, you need to have these teachable moments because they don't, for some reason, have the thought that that's just not okay. Like,
Right.
they just have this sense that, well, if I can't park close, I'm just not coming to work today.
Right.
And it's this weird shift, but yeah, why? It's
Right. And it's we're trying to, so the
still
quick
the why.
thing
We
is
don't
the-
have the
we
answer to
don't
the
have
why.
the answer.
We
don't
can't
have
give you that information.
But it
I'm
is
sorry.
part of the conversation on what is education doing, what is our culture doing that produces the next generation's difficulties and deficiencies within the workplace. Is it the workplace that hasn't changed? Is it Gen Z that has changed so much that it's just not
Clicking.
with what's common courtesy, common sense, and common knowledge? I don't again, we don't have the answer to that, but it is something that
is brought up in education, and how can we better prepare?
and I think we start seeing that shift in middle school. I really, really do see it really plainly in when it comes to literacy. I was watching Chris Hayes, who writes a book called The Siren's Call, and it talks about a post-literate society that
So
we're
crazy,
crafting.
y'all.
At the same time, this idea that we're pushing the culture is gearing, because of TikTok, shifts to technology that becomes more audio and visual centered. And when you have AI on top of that, that allows you to write without needing to know style or creativity, that takes kind of taking the place of your own writer's voice, that the idea of the written word is becoming antiquated and becoming less valued in culture. So we're producing an illiterate society if literacy is defined as the ability to read and write. That the written word becomes less of a
Which we are still teaching in school. Like, we
Yeah.
are still teaching children to read and write. But it's this
Right.
idea that as a society, perhaps we're not putting as much emphasis on it as we should.
Well, yes and no, and then on my students, for example, my sixth graders particularly, they prefer and only want the audio versions of the text, because when we look at social emotional learning, we look at audible or audio files as particularly helpful with students that have dysgraphia or dyslexia, so you can hear the story. But then students that don't have dysgraphia or dyslexia are also listening to audio and only audio and not seeing what that looks like on the written page and just hearing it. So when you read a passage, they are that fluency piece is missing. And so I do see, and teachers educators might not have control over that either, because they can go home and listen to audio. It seems it's a positive thing. It really is a positive thing. But the impact of that, I wonder, on the written word. And remember, we had also gone to no cursive, and then we're just bringing back cursive because we realized the importance of it in identifying and reading through historical documents, right? And so this idea of signing one's name, what that means, and how personalized signatures, but also if you're a historian, you kind of have to know cursive
Well, it's almost
writing.
like being able to know another language so
Right.
that you can at least seem knowledgeable of different sources.
Right, and so I fear and hope at the same time. Fear that it's going to happen, but hope that it'll turn back. Is we almost have to go through the change and the undertaking of what writing means and how it's valued before we bring value back to it. And I think that's where the AI shift is bringing us.
Well, and I see this in math a little bit. We actually had a meeting the other day talking about some of this and what our high schools have told us about what things that they are seeing as missing. And it's this constant use of needing a calculator for even simple math ideas like multiplication or division, like fractions, that seem like they should be memorized at this point, but they have not. Like there's something that is missing in the memorization world,
Right.
as well. Like they can't process things for long periods of time, and they have trouble like containing things from one grade level to another. Like they should have had that last year. Like you guys did this.
That
But there's a
long-term memory.
long-term retention or like a need to think that it's important to file away. It is definitely a shift that I have noticed. That's
And that's kind of going with this idea of a potential cognitive decline with how fast technology is growing and how reliable we are on it to think
right.
for us. And I think that's the danger with AI shifting or with technology growing so fast and us giving it to our kids so quickly, right? I think that's part of the problem, is that we shove the computer in 6th grade or in 5th grade, or iPads and devices in 3rd grade and 4th grade. I think
they can be wonderful benefits in education, but we also have to be careful that it's not
there's a responsibility
overused.
piece, right?
Yes.
And I don't know if we are being a responsive culture in how we delegate what technology is used and when. And so not to say that these are bad platforms or technology is bad, but I think that it is definitely influencing our cognitive growth. And when we looked at our research, it also, if we're looking at cognitive decline, that is going to influence our longevity and lifespan, because we know that as you get older and you want to keep that cognition going, it helps us live longer. Right? As human beings, it's so important. And so if we look at cognitive decline starting in the most epitomizing age of growth, then I don't know where we're headed, man. That's super apocalyptic. I know.
You're going deep. You're going dark.
I'm going deep. I'm going dark. I'm so sorry. I don't want it. No, as a teacher, I don't think that's where we're headed. But I do see reason for the fear.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think I see it as much as a cognitive decline, but more as they're not getting the ability to develop as much as generations in the past.
Oh, I love that. That's very hopeful. Thank you. You just redeemed that darkness of mine and the rabbit hole of apocalypse.
Yeah, I just think that they just don't have a hunger for
that
the
drive is
same educational experience that we do.
So in when I was growing up, my mom always said, get to light your butt on fire, right? Like get your butt going. You got to get to do something. I don't see that drive as much, that impulse of urgency, that
well, and I think that goes with some of the research we found saying that the Gen Alphas, they really need to feel inspired by what you're talking about.
Man, that's so exhausting.
You know, they just want to be inspired. It reminds me of like someone laying on a lounge chair and they're just waiting for that like light bulb moment and like, oh, okay, now I can start because I've been inspired to do so. And, you know, whereas we're kind of like, yeah, like you said, your mom was like, come on, light a fire. Let's go. We got to do this.
Right.
You just, that suck it up buttercup attitude. Like we grew up with, and my kids hear that expression all the time. Suck it up, buttercup.
Suck it up, buttercup.
Because sometimes you don't get to be inspired. You just got to do it. And you just got to learn it. And you just got to know it. And that's really kind of the struggle between being teachers in a completely different generation than our students is that balance in the classroom. Like I was just saying, like they want to be inspired. And I just want to be like, you just got to do it. Like, come on, people. And even our Gen Zs, they tend to want to, they're more of an empowering, like they want to be a part of it. They want to feel empowered by it. They want you to give them a little bit and they want to go with it. And I do see that still in a lot of my students. Like they don't want me to work everything out for them in math. They want me to give them a little bit so that they can go with it. But then I do see a few who are really more of a Gen Alpha, because there's that transition piece.
Right.
We see both of it in the classroom right now, where they're kind of like, no, I'm not feeling it today. Maybe tomorrow. And you're like, no, I'm sorry, that's
Well, we're moving ahead
that's
tomorrow.
not an
We're going to
option.
cover
You still have to do it today. Like, you don't. I'm sorry I didn't inspire you today. Do it anyway. Like, it is a really, it's frustrating. Like, we laugh at it, but it can be very frustrating, because they'll come the next day and be like, I didn't feel like doing my homework. And I'm like, okay, well, I hope you feel like getting a 0.
That's my
right.
response.
I hope you feel like it, like, because I can't grade something you don't do.
I think
so. There's this
phrase that I use that I say, if I could grade students on likability, everyone would get an A. But I'm not grading you on whether I like you. I grade you on a skill set,
what you produce,
and
how well you produce it.
But I do see what you're saying in regards to that empowerment versus inspire, where I can give, in years past, I could give a kernel of an idea and then students would run away with it. If I give a kernel of an idea to my younger classes, they would repeat it. And what's interesting, I don't know if you see this in your classes, what's interesting is that if someone says something's a good idea, they tend to think, well, then I can use it as my own, and they almost reflect each other's good idea in thinking that, okay, well, that's the expectation, so I'm going to imitate that same thing rather than thinking of something else that could be.
Well, because they just want to be right.
Yes, and because, yes.
It's not they necessarily want it to be their own. They want to make sure that it's correct.
Right.
Which is a whole nother weird
Right.
place.
So I think that authenticity of self is something that's
they're still working on.
They're still, yeah. But I don't think it's a drive to have. Like, I don't know if that drive is there.
Maybe that's from our chatbots who produce all the same things with AI. Like, just tell me an answer and it's there, and everyone's going to get that same thing.
Right. But I do worry with chatbots, because we almost have to think about being more critical, right, of our teaching our children and our students to be more critical of chatbots, right? Because it's not a person that they're talking to, and that non-human connection, I don't know what that's gonna bring philosophically on a philosophical level to culture. But again, I don't want to go to that dark place.
It goes with that. I constantly say all the time, even work in math, is, does it make sense?
Right.
Like, does that answer feasibly make sense?
Yeah.
And even this week, I had a student struggling to get the right answer, but she knew she was wrong. And I said, you don't know how great of a skill you have right now, just being able to be aware that you're wrong.
Right.
Like, that is the first step to be able to correcting yourself. Because there's so many students that we do see that they're wrong, but they don't even realize that they're wrong. Right. And you can't fix something you don't even know isn't wrong.
Right. That awareness.
Right. So I think that kind of goes along the line of, like, students have to be able to have the information that it could be wrong.
Right.
Like, the information that, kind of like in our generation with Wikipedia.
Right.
Like, Wikipedia is wrong. Wikipedia is wrong. Well, it's not that it's wrong. Some of the information on Wikipedia is actually accurate, but you have to have the awareness that it could be.
Yes.
To fact check yourself against a more legitimate source.
Right. So it's a launching point rather than it's an actual.
Exactly. And that, I feel like, is where we currently need to help our students understand with AI and technology.
But I think also with middle school skill sets, and we're talking about middle school as parents, to our audience, to our viewers, to our listeners, this idea of middle school being about those skills, those aha moments, those chances to be aware, those opportunities to self-reflect and correct, rather than the content at hand. It is about that process of how do I as a student grow as a group and still have personalized learning? How do I be a leader among my peers and a follower for my leaders? I think it is, how do I make a friend that's real? How do I listen to advisors that are real and not chatbots?
Getting back that personal connection.
Yes, getting back that personal connection. I think middle school is going to be the framework for the future and how we deal with all these influences and changes. It's going to happen in the middle school, and I can't wait for it. That's the exciting part. I won't go dark and apocalyptic. I do think it'll be great. I really do. With that said, we do have some advice regarding where middle school is headed. We have...
Speaking of generational, we're going back a little bit in time.
Do you remember the Fab Five from back in the day in the early 90s?
Yeah.
The Fab Five.
The Fab Five.
Yeah, for the straight guy. I remember Carson. Well, they revamped the Fab Five on Netflix, and we thought we would revamp the middle school makeover with the Fab Five and changes you might be seeing in your school and for your child. The Fab Five middle school makeover.
That's so millennial.
So our five, remember our five gurus and expertise of the Fab Five include the design doctor, the grooming guru, the food and wine, but we're going to switch because we're looking at middle school, nutritional expert, and our culture vulture, and our fashion savant. Bum, 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 bum.
So, in the middle school world, what do these really mean? Our design doctor, that is going to be our school's focus on design. Like, how do we set up classrooms versus, we have collaboration versus independent work. There's, like, what do the group dynamics look like?
Right.
How do you think that's changed? How do you think?
From our generation to this generation, there's far more transparency involved in the design of classrooms. I've seen classrooms that are fishbowl classrooms where they have glass doors instead of walls, but you will also have the one door model because of security concerns that we've had over the years. Inside the classroom, I see more collaborative spaces, collaborative desks,
flexible seating,
where you have standing desks and you have fidget mechanisms to anything that's going to help the student learn, whether it's something as small as a fidget spinner, as large as, have you seen those surfing boards that you can stand on and balance?
I've seen them.
So
like
they're
the fidget tool, or the things that go underneath desks that you can move or sway. And
in the high school and in upper school, I've seen chairs designed for more seminar discussion points where they roll and they have flopping lap desks that they can maneuver and change out.
Lots of whiteboard spaces
for
students to collaborate versus just the front of the room, sage on the stage kind of deal.
Right, they're all around. I've even seen whiteboard paint, so you can write on the walls, and there's chalkboard paint that you can also write on the walls. And moms and dads, I'm sure that you might already have chalkboard paint in your son or daughter's bedroom, but the idea of the bedroom leisurely furniture kind of going into the classroom too, like those lap desks with the pillows underneath for individualized beanbag chairs, things that make the learning space both individualized, collaborative, but a safe space.
Yes.
That's very millennial of me to say. A safe space. I'm
Safe
so
space.
sorry.
And then we have the grooming guru. What do you think about this one?
The idea of being proactive with hygiene with middle school students, it's really important. And
it's really hard.
do you remember, did you ever have cotillion or some...
I know of cotillion. We didn't have cotillion in the North. at least where I lived in the north. I'd never heard of it until I moved here. It was not a thing.
Now that was an upper school thing, but there were things that led to that, where we had makeup classes and etiquette classes, but through outside organizations of the school. I think there's a lot to be said about how we can help our middle schoolers with that hygiene element and nutritional element. But one thing that I have seen students do particularly is take very good care of the skin. I would not have taken good care of my skin as a 12-year-old, but
they're obsessed. I mean, like, you hear them all saying, I'm gonna go to Ulta. I need my mom to get me this new serum, and I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So like, I'm very basic. I'm a Midwesterner, so we're just kind of there.
I will tell you that there are 7th graders that know how to put on makeup better than I do from all TikTok tutorials. So they know their grooming, and on one side of the fence, you know, they know how to.
But
groom
then you
themselves.
have the kids like my son, who I have to make him take a shower
or deodorant, right? Like you have
the boys
to set
versus
that
girls
routine.
are super different.
I agree. Our third one is our
food and nutrition.
Yes, food and nutrition. I think a lot of our students come into school, a lot of our children come into school with potential allergies or know of their classmates that have allergies. So we have...
They're more hyper aware of nutrition.
Aware.
I do hear they talk about sugars more. They talk about watching the fat contents more. They know more about calories. But yet they still want to eat 5 donuts. When someone brings in donuts, they still want 5 of them. But they know that they probably shouldn't, but they still want them. So they're still kids. I mean, that's what kids are going to do. But the talk of... We had a conversation the other day, someone brought up how red dye 3 has been banned. And I was like, how do you even know that there's red dye 3 in products? Right. Like, their awareness is so much different than it was when we were growing up.
And that goes to...
Which is not bad.
It's not bad, except if we're looking in the lunchroom, I do worry about girls knowing about dieting and knowing about regulating and doing... limiting themselves on their intake of calories. I do see that.
Right.
And so it's...
But we had that when we were growing up, too.
We did. But not...
But there's more of an awareness now, and sometimes because there's an awareness, we think there's more of it.
Yes.
Which I'm not sure there's any more or any less. I just think we are aware.
Yes. The culture vulture. This is somewhat on the negative side, but hence vulture. But there the school's learning environment has kind of shifted in past generations, and there was this emphasis on
fun.
Yes, and we had that we had an episode of that earlier on just fun, but that emphasis that learning is fun, and if it's not fun, it's not learning is the message being sent. I don't think that's the right message.
Not true.
That growth mindset is what we want to focus on. And then just to be aware of how AI is being included in the school and what those parameters are. As a teacher, it's I was reading, and it said to be clear on whether AI is appropriate for your assignment. Teachers might say that, or might be very clear on AI. They might not be very clear on AI, and students will do it anyway. I would definitely see and have a conversation about what that might be doing to their learning process, on what they are learning.
Because school is school. Mm-hmm. I mean, the reason we are there is to provide educational standards for your children.
Right.
You know, we want them to be smart, functioning human beings in society.
And then our last one is our fashion savant. I think students need to know the difference between public and private worlds, and that those boundaries have been blurred many times. I don't know if they're in existence, but at the same time, I do know they are because of Gen Z not being able to adapt to the workforce. There's still a line between that public and private self. And And so that professional attire, that professionalism, I think is incredibly important in what they wear to school every day.
Even if everyone else is doing it, that doesn't necessarily make it the right thing to do.
Right. So if everyone jumped off a bridge, would you
Right.
jump off the bridge too? But I think we need to be a savant of fashion with our perspective as an adult figure. And I also see this with new teachers too, as Gen Z students are becoming into the workforce. That includes new teachers, and not knowing how to dress themselves appropriately for a younger audience. I do see that. And so I can understand why employees don't hire sometimes. But that there has to be a difference between a public and private self, and schools having events to showcase that difference.
Yes. And it is okay to understand that there are different fashion, there's a different layering to yourself when you're in certain situations. And you don't need to wear pajamas in certain occasions, in certain settings.
Right.
It's just, I mean, even though people wear pajamas to Walmart, that doesn't necessarily mean you should wear pajamas to Walmart.
You wouldn't wear pajamas to church, right? Any church. No pajamas to church. All right, so
there's our Fab 5 middle school makeover. Exit ticket time. Exit ticket time. Number 1. It's just middle school. Gen Z and Gen Alpha are learning that they don't have to learn. Well, not really, which may be a problem in the learning environment.
Number 2, it's just middle school. It's not just student-centered, it's me-centered, individualized, and personally motivated.
And number 3, it's just middle school. It's actually a big deal.
Woo!
This is the conclusion of our first season. Thank you so much for joining us for all of our episodes. Don't forget to check out earlier ones if this is the first time you've happened to tune in. We just appreciate you joining us and following our journey and passion for middle school.
This has been It's Just Middle School with Sarah
And Kelly.
Thank you very much.
Build me up, buttercup, baby, just to let me down. And mess me around, and then worst of all, you never call baby when you say you will. But I love you still, I need you more than anyone, darling. I know that I have from the start. So build me up, buttercup, don't break my heart. Boom, boom.